anything until, we're not going to really believe this until we see that you are really serious. And so we proceeded in earnest to get this done. But the issue I'm raising is that in the market, we were told that there was great potential for it. Something else happened, Chairman, which is that one of the cruise lines, Marilla, had been going to Cuba, and for a variety of reasons which I won't discuss here, came to us and said, you told us about this Port Royal thing. Could you accommodate us in January 2020? This was in the back end of 2017. We explained to them where we were in the process of development. We indicated that we would make every effort to try to accelerate it to accommodate the ships in January. You could say this is opportunistic marketing. If we didn't tell them that we were doing it, then they wouldn't have known. But they came, and it was the only line that didn't say, when you finish it, we will give you the bookings that you want. This one said, we'd like to come on those dates. And so we had to accelerate our plans to bring this into fruition, which is what we have done. What is at the Old Cold Wharf today, the Seawalk, which we had acquired in 2018, is now stationed out there. It is fully functional. It could operate today if a ship came. We have also had to build the landside facilities for the terminal, which include a terminal building, which include ground transport staging areas, which include all the necessary bathroom facilities, the area for holding the ground transport operators. These are all at an advanced stage of completion, Mr. Chairman. The first ship comes on Monday, and we think that we will be able to satisfy the cruise lines when they come. By way of comparison, I've already told you that the other ships came in December 2016 and 2017. They came into Kingston Wharves, which is a cargo port. What we have out there in Port Royal at the moment, even though everything is not finished, is far superior to what they would have come into at Kingston Wharves. But we learned from those experiences, and we know the things that the cruise guests like, and we will be accommodating them. The other two elements that I want to highlight, Chairman, is that we understood that people are coming to Port Royal because it is historic. And so we entered into discussions with and arrived at an agreement with JNHT for the redevelopment of Fort Charles. Fort Charles is an iconic attraction. It has a great history, naval history. It's related a bit to the pirates as well. But it has really remained in I call it a dormant state for a while, and we want to do some upgrades to make it, we'd like to make it the best port attraction in the hemisphere. That work is at an advanced stage as well, Minister, Chairman. We have experts, international experts, working with local craftsmen and artisans in the redevelopment exercise. It will be one where you're going to see for the first time the guns will be, the guns that are going to be mounted are the guns that were actually there in the 1800s, or replicas of those guns. We'll redevelop the buildings that are there, the admiral's quarters, the rank and file quarters. We are going to be also doing work in the area behind Fort Charles, which includes the Giddy House and the old Victoria Battery. We are going to replace the gun in the Victoria Battery with a replica, which shows how it would have worked. So at the time, at the turn of just around 1890 or so, when the Victoria Battery was developed, those guns were the most modern anywhere in the hemisphere. And we're going to show how that would have worked at that point in time. the Giddy House, we're going to develop, it's going to make it into an attraction by itself. So there will be a number of developments in Fort Charles, and again, those are advanced. We have had training we started out with 80 persons from the community. It fell down, attrition and so on, to 40. They have been through various training exercises in storytelling, in being able to conduct tours and so on, and they will be integrally involved. JBDC had also done some training in crafts, and we'll have a crafts market out there which will feature the products that are made by the persons in Port Royal, but also some other crafts persons. In the town itself, and there are some works which have been done. When we started, Chairman, the townspeople, the fisher folk in particular, said that they had been neglected for a long time, and that one of the things that they would most like to have is a jetty to replace the old ferry jetty that used to be operated by Port Royal when there was a ferry boat service. That ferry had rotted down to maybe 20% of it was left standing and quite unsafe, the jetty. And so we undertook to, although it was not in our project scope, we undertook to rebuild that jetty for them, and it is rebuilt, and they have told us that they are very pleased to have that facility. We also have been doing work at the school, and an important part of the project that involves National Water Commission, Chairman, is that we had plans for dealing with the sewage at the terminal and at Fort Charles. We were asked to expand that to include the town, and it didn't take much effort to do that. Obviously, the town has no sewage system whatsoever. The town has some collection points, but those are not necessarily maintained on an ongoing basis. But we were in touch with Mark and Garth Jackson, who are here, and we decided on a strategy which works like this, Minister. We would take the sewage facilities that we had for the terminal, which is modular. It was built to be expandable. We acquired some land just close to the Port Royal Cemetery, and we have moved the sewage treatment to that location. We have asked the developers of the sewage system to design now for the entire town, the existing town, not the town that Heather is going to talk to you about, but the existing town. It has the capacity to take all of those. That work, the design work for doing so, has been done. So our sewage from the terminal will now be processed at that location. We have put in the pipelines under our promenade going into the town, or will be, because that's not finished, we will put in those pipelines that will carry the sewage from the town to the processing site. The designs are at an advanced stage for how we would treat with the sewage in the town of Port Royal. The townspeople are fully aware of those things, Chairman, because we have been meeting on a regular basis with them. We have asked our sister agencies to be of support in finalization of the plans for this coming cruise ship call. And I would like to say, Chairman, that they have all been very responsive. If you go there now, NWA has patched the roadway from the Palisades Airport all the way into the town. They have actually patched all the potholes in the town as well. There may be one or two that have not yet been patched, but you can see that preparations have been made to have it done. We asked, people will want the way passengers will operate in the town. They'll come to the terminal. For those who want to go into the town, they will walk along a promenade, and that will lead to Port Royal, and then down the street which runs beside St. Peter's Church, all the way into Fort Charles. In the absence of the promenade being finished, they will be bused to that location. But then there will be a pathway for them to go from, when they're finished at Fort Charles, to go over to the Old Naval Hospital, to move on to Broad Street, pass in front of Gloria's by the jetty, and up Cagway Street back to the entrance to the town. We wanted to make sure that the persons who live along those pathways, that an effort was made to ensure that their facilities, their buildings and so on were in good condition. There are cases where the boards on the wall were rotted and deteriorating, so you could look straight into the house. So we asked for the support of NHT, and NHT has agreed to undertake those works. But the project is small by NHT standards, and so we got JSIF involved because that is their MO. They work with contracts of this size, and I'm pleased to say that they are going to do everything that was asked of them before the end of this week.
Could you just repeat, what was that project?
That project was to repair all and do housing improvements along the pathways that the guests will be moving. We've also, because you're going to have tourists, you need to have wayfinding, you need to have information on some of the historic buildings. We asked our colleagues at TEF if they would undertake a package of signing, road signs. People need to know how to move around, wayfinding signs, as well as signs which explain what the historical artifacts are. And they have come on board, and those signs are in the process of being developed, Chairman. So I would say that the collaboration has been of a high level. We have had no pushback from any of our sister agencies in trying to get this done. I'll close by saying I will be happy to answer any questions you have, Chairman. I think the question had come to us, how much money is being spent on this. The overall cost, including the seawalk, is $45 million. The seawalk is just, let us, for around $45 million US. Oh. So if you take the seawalk out, which is maybe 10 million, the rest of all the works at the terminal, promenade, Fort Charles, all of those other works would amount to $35 million. We have requested and received from the Ministry of Finance a commitment to waive some of the taxes on items which are being imported for the project. And we are grateful for that support that we have received from the Ministry of Finance. In terms of marketing, Chairman, Joy is here. Roberts, she was here, I believe, the last time you met and had spoken to some of the marketing. We also do some marketing in the sense of staying in touch with the people in the cruise lines who deal with the ground facilities and so on. And so we constantly meet with them, and that process has been ongoing. At this point, I would say we are very optimistic about the uplift that will occur between this year and when the cruise season starts. We are even more optimistic 2 years out, because these ships make their plans 2 years in advance, very often, even up to 3. I said last maybe once or twice before, but I also want to point out to you, Minister, that, Chairman, that the cruise business is at an interesting stage. There are more new builds, new ships being built now than ever before in the history of the cruise business. There are many new ships, and many of those are going to come into the Caribbean. As you know well, because you have had some experience with it, Chairman, cruise lines will make these decisions when the time is right. We think the time is right for them to be making itinerary decisions, which is why they are coming to us on an ongoing basis about itinerary planning, not just for existing cruise ships, but the new ships which are coming. So we have benefited in a sense from Marietta having said, let's finish it by the 20th of January. We are certain by March we will have completed everything that we have planned to do, although on January the 20th we will be able to accept them in a condition, as I pointed out, which is superior to what we accepted the guests at Kingston Wharves. And we feel even better about having finished it so that people can come and see it and have the experience of having Marietta work there, that it is going to, the economic future is potentially quite bright. How do we work with UDC? Heather will speak, I'm certain, to the overall master planning process, and that's a long-term planning process. She will go through the process that they have to undertake to build relationships with the community and to ensure that what is being built has the input of those entities. I would view it as a longer-term planning process. She'll tell you the time frame she has to complete that. But we are very confident, Chairman, that the things that we have done are consistent with the plans of the UDC. It would have called for a port at that location. It is in place. The promenade is a good walkway which links it creates a pathway from the terminal, from Why Not, from the Admiral's houses and so on, all the way into Port Royal. That's an asset to it. Fort Charles would have had to be developed. We are developing Fort Charles into a premier attraction. The walking tour, we think, is going to be consistent with what will emerge out of the master plan. And so the storytelling and all of that would be consistent again with the kinds of products that would be developed. So there's nothing that would be at odds with what the UDC is going to come forward with, even though those final plans have not been finished, Chairman. I'll close there, Chairman, and if there are any questions, or would you like me to hand it over to Heather to continue the presentation?
All right. Members, do you want us to just take the UDC just to get a complete picture, and then we'll deal with the environment and water, get them out of the way, and then we can go back? All right?
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Yes.
So the UDC has been tasked with really 3 key items in this process. And the first is to do the master planning. Of course, we're involved in that because there were previous plans. There have been plans, as Prof mentioned, for Port Royal for quite some time. So the first one is to advance the master planning process. The second is to engage the stakeholders thoroughly across that master planning process. And stakeholders here includes our sister agencies and the community and whatever regulations are required. So all of that stakeholder management. And then third, to lead the coordination of what is really a joint Government of Jamaica initiative. That's actually the term we've been using. That is a joint initiative of all of the government, and that what we are primarily doing there is coordinating and being able to lead that, the documentation of that. So I will go through those 3 parts. So first let me talk about the master planning. There have been a number of plans for Port Royal. In fact, as Prof said, a number of the previous plans for Port Royal were predicated on the notion of a cruise ship coming in closer to the sunken city or in the area of Chocolata Hole. And that was problematic for many reasons because there are heritage assets there. Also, as Prof said, it is also a very sensitive area ecologically, and it is, apart from being declared under the GNHT Act and being considered for UNESCO, it is also declared under the National Resource Conservation Authority Act, and it is a Ramsar wetland of international importance. So there are many considerations in doing this kind of, doing any kind of intervention in Port Royal. So for many years there were plans that were unable to advance because of that, how to get past those challenges. And really one of the big catalysts for the completion of master planning now is the new location, the new solution to bringing cruise ships, which is the sea walk as Prof described, and the ability to take that port from being in the historic town further out, and therefore that allows us to have the cruise shipping as well as the town in the development of the town. So the first stage of the master planning was to look at all of the previous plans. So we gathered all the plans that we have. Some we had done, some were done by other agencies, and we looked at those, and what we took from that was what is the best of all. Now, an important point is there are quite a bit of regulatory changes that have occurred since the last sets of concept plans. So for example, the needs for strategic environmental assessments, more detailed kinds of archaeological assessments, some of those things would not have been contemplated before. So we have proceeded to do some of those things as part of the master planning. So I want to make it very clear too that the master plan is not complete. I know there is a bit of a misconception that it's complete. So what we did was we produced last year what we call a concept plan, which is the baseline. It gathered all the information we could find. It gathered all of the changes and all of the baseline information. From that baseline information, we went forward with more detailed stakeholder consultations. Again, that's with other agencies, and then very importantly, with the community. So the stakeholder consultations with the community, what we have done is we have engaged the Social Development Commission, which is a primary government agency for dealing with community consultations, as our lead in that aspect of these works. And the SCC has been working in the community, and they have been working, and we got to the point last year where we had a public meeting, which was really the official launch. So we had a public meeting in November last year, which was really the official launch of the joint Government of Jamaica initiative. And that was one of the things we were guided by the SDC to do, to make an official statement in the community, to then facilitate other smaller community activities. Now, beyond that, SDC will be continuing its visioning work with the community. Because of the nature of SDC's work, and of course they're here so they can speak in more detail, they do a lot of one-on-one work with the community, even work without us there, so that they can get a true feeling of what the community's concerns or interests are and help to inform what happens. But beyond that, we're going even a step further in this particular community to look at beyond the SCC visioning, as a layer on top of that, to look at community planning with the community. So further to the SCC's work, which will be continuing now, we will be doing design charrettes. And design charrettes, what we will do is essentially take the baseline land use maps and have conversations with the community about where things go, what areas they have concerns about. We have learned in development that the people on the ground always know things much better than we do. So if they advise that there's a certain spot that always floods, you need to believe them. So a lot of that kind of detail work we'll be going forward with. As Prof said, these are also things that will be informed by the first sets of ships that will come. So we will also be monitoring what happens, where do people go, how does it work when tourists come into the town, what happens, where are the pinch points, what are those concerns. So those are some of the things we're doing in working with the stakeholders. Of course, another big part of working with stakeholders is working with our other government agencies, and that brings me to the third element, which is the coordination. So the coordination is really a matter of making sure that we keep a check on what is happening, and we keep clear reporting and have regular updates. And now the coordination, what we've been looking at across coordination and master planning is some of the main areas of concern, and that would include things like infrastructure, housing, economic opportunities, safety and security, and the potential for it becoming a model smart town. So these are some of the areas we've been looking at. Of course, as as discussed, master planning is not a short-term thing. It looks really far into the future. But we also recognize that there are works that need to be done to support some of the early successes we'll have, such as when the port is first used. So there's been quite a bit of, well, Prof has described it, so I won't need to go into that too much detail, but a number of government agencies have come together to support the short-term works and also be a part of planning the longer-term works. So we have everything from the patching of the roads that's happening. We have major cleanup going on with NSWMA. We have works being led by, to certain public conveniences being supported by the KSAMC. We have other works being done by the KSAC as the current city manager too. In fact, all our agencies, a very, very important part of infrastructure overall would be sewage treatment. So sewage treatment is really the foundation of allowing development to happen. And I think one of the big successes here is that we have sewage treatment being led by the PAAC, the extension of their plant to take in the sewage of the town, which is not that, as Prof said, not that large a stretch to change. And that really will give us the platform on which to really make development happen in the town. So beyond that, I just want to summarize some of the other works that will be going on. So critical to housing, and indeed housing was one of the areas identified in the early sets of discussions with the community. Critical to housing is looking at who is there, what is their situation, and then determining how best to treat with them. So we commissioned a housing survey in about in the middle of last year, and that was done by the housing division of our parent ministry, Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. And in fact, we just received the final draft. And from that housing survey, we have been working with other housing agencies to determine the best options for housing going forward. Of course, a big part of the housing in the old town, which is the city core, is the Port Royal Brotherhood. And we have also been having discussions with Port Royal Brotherhood to determine what interventions can be made. As Prof described, there have been some short-term repair, but we are also looking at longer-term upgrades, long-term upgrades to those units. Let me just say that we are also doing a business and community assessment and sensitization that's being led through the SDC. So that will help us to know who is there, what kind of work they do, and help us to move that forward. And finally, the contract we're just about to sign is for a strategic environmental assessment. Now, as I said, that's one of the things that is needed for a new master plan that would not have been needed before, because it is, as I said, a very ecologically sensitive area. We need to know what is there, and a strategic environmental assessment would be a basis of looking at the environmental concerns in the larger area. I should have been very specific. We have been looking also at the further boundaries. So the larger boundary of the Palisades Port Royal Protected Area goes as far as from Harborview roundabout, and it takes in both land and water, so both marine and terrestrial resources. So we have looked at that level as well as the level of the old city core, which is where some of more heritage sites are located. So we're looking at all of that. Now the long-term end, the result of the the master planning process should end by about the middle of this year. When the master planning process is completed, and that is when we have all the assessments in, when we've done consultation with the community, when we've looked at what are all of the technical, social and economic requirements, and all those things come together in a document, the intention is for that document now to be formally used as a means of managing the town, because you would have completely set it out, you'll be clear about what support it needs and what are the options and functioning in there. So after the completion of the master planning, we're moving again to make it a model situation where we would be clear on how the town is managed thereafter. I also want to just add that an important element of our master planning looks at, even though Port Royal is one of the oldest towns in Jamaica, looking at what is the newest and best technology to support the town's operation in the long term. So we have been doing quite a bit of work with eGov, with USF, even with JPS, to look at what are the new and smart technologies that we can bring to the town for the town's long-term functioning, so that the town be able to have, for example, Wi-Fi access, so you can access, have apps that give data on the town and collect data on the town, so that there's information that can be given in real time, that geotagged, and a lot of data collection, so that data will be driving the long-term decisions made there. So just to say where we are in the master planning process, as I said, we completed the concept plan. We have, most of the assessments are on the way, and indeed so too are the consultations. We are looking at drafting the final plans and looking even right now at an interim plan, as well as looking at the community projects that will come out of those visioning and charrettes, design charrettes that we'll do with the SDC. And then we'll be moving into the completion of the larger projects. So there will be larger projects like the completion of the sewage treatment plant, other projects related to roads and drains, and other infrastructure work, as well as housing. And then we will look to put in place a proper management system. And just finally, a key part of our stakeholder coordination and really just a feedback mechanism is that we launched as well at our public meeting a website, portroyal2020.com, where we put the data and the information on what we're working, where we are in the master planning, any news items, any photos from activities that are happening. And we've done a number of activities, everything from replanting mangroves along the Palisados for International Tree Planting Day, because we have mangroves that have been removed. So we have community sessions teaching people about the importance of the mangroves. We had a Christmas treat, and we'll be doing other activities in the community, and that is a repository of all the things that are happening. It's also a repository of the documentation. So the concept plan, for example, is available at portroyal2020.com for download and for review. And another important part is the website allows for a feedback form. So anyone who we may miss in our actual detailed stakeholders, there's also a space there for people to give feedback, and that feedback is shared with all the agencies who are part of this effort. And so there's also means to gather information and feedback that way.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Speaker. Before we go as determined, just for clarity, you said that you're going to do an environmental study of the wider Port Royal. I suspect, wouldn't that be similar to wouldn't you tie that into what Professor Shirley did? Or?
So there are two levels, and NEPA is here, they can give you the details, but there are two levels of environmental assessment that are done.
But have you done one yet?
So I'm going to explain what is required when you're doing a specific project, like the port project. There would be an environmental impact assessment specific to what is going to be built at the port. And an environmental impact assessment was done, and they went through that process. So that's very specific to the port. And any other project that may happen in Port Royal is likely to require an environmental impact assessment. What we're doing as part of the master planning is a strategic environmental assessment. So that's kind of a layer above. So it wouldn't go into the details, say, of where a driveway would be and thing, but instead look at the overall environmental concerns in the area. As I said, the area includes quays, water and land, and so there are always, this is a higher level of environmental assessment that we'll be doing to inform the larger master planning.
I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just saying that I agree with you. I think that a project will have a plan, but if you're going to be taking large numbers of persons into a community like this, that the Urban Development Commission would have, before we started, done a broader environmental study.
We are doing one.
Oh, I say you're doing it now. You have, but it has started.
It's about to start. We're signing a contract now.
Right, but it might have been good if we had started earlier. But all right, now just for clarity, there was a plan before, which was a private-public sector agreement some time ago, and it back and forth. Is that done for clear as everybody?
There have been a number of plans. I just want to clarify that. And indeed, what we did was gather all of the plans that we had.
No, the point is there was one where persons had put some money in jointly with UDC. Has that been paid out, or is it just Defunct. What happened with that?
That is a subsidiary of the UDC, and it is in abeyance at this time. So we're reviewing that. But the content of that work is something we consider.
So all those persons that deem themselves as shareholders and otherwise, that has now, they've walked away.
No, that company is in abeyance, and we will revive that company to address all of the issues of shareholders and all of those matters. So it's not closed out.
Well, abeyance means closed out.
No, abeyance means on hold.
Okay, all right,
yes.
on hold. So you're just saying that, so you have no problems with that then? It's not
we will be addressing that and determine how that will relate to the work that's going on as well.
Well, again, I'm just saying it might have been good to have resolved some of
I
these
agree,
issues
I
before
agree.
we went down. It's not, we've had 2 years of planning. Lastly, just in terms of, as we do with Mr. Campbell constantly reminds us, money though, in terms of actual input cash into Port Royal in this development, what do you have on the table?
So right now, our master planning and coordination efforts, the total value of that is $167 million. Jamaican, just for clarity.
167 million US,
Yes.
just for what? For master plan?
Jamaican dollars,
Yeah, man,
yes,
sorry.
for the master planning and coordination.
Jamaican.
Right.
Just for the plan.
For
But
the-
you don't really have any, in terms of building anything, you're not building.
That is for the master planning and the coordination. Each project that will be developed would need to be determined what its value is. So I can give you some other ideas of some of the things we have looked at.
No,
So-
hold on, no, I just really wanted to know the expenditure.
Well, that is what is on the
Who is doing this?
2019-2020 budget,
This 167 million that's been executed by,
UDC. So that includes some of the consultancies I've told you about.
That's for
So like
this financial
this
year.
financial year, yes.
all right, we can go into that after. All right, just to, all right, so members, we had indicated, could we then just take the NEPA and the Water Commission so we can sort of relieve some and then come back to the overall picture? So I would start with Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight, I think while philosophically we're all in agreement with this project, you know, there's always
Yes.
environmental concern, that you being the chief environmental warden, I turn it over to you to.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members, morning, colleagues. Chairman, my comments are going to be very short. Let me just say we were extremely pleased to have facilitated and guided the Port Authority as both in its conceptualization of the project and getting them through the approval process. As MD said, this area is a protected area, and it's also a Ramsar site of international importance. So we had to be careful in providing the guidance as to what could be done and how it could be done. Bear in mind that we also had to, at the end of the process, write to the Ramsar Convention to explain to the convention what we did and how it was done and what the expectations are. Part of the guidance we gave the Port Authority was to mandate an environmental impact assessment report. This environmental impact assessment report was completed. It was reviewed. We found it acceptable after some iterations, Prof will tell you. It was then made available to the public. We followed the established procedures for consultation. That is to give the widest possible participation in the process. We had a public meeting in July, 12th of July to be exact, in Port Royal. It was well attended. Persons were very open about the development. And subsequent to that, we had to get the verbatim notes from that meeting, as well as all the public comments, All those would have to be considered. We then went to our authority, which is the Beach Control Authority and the NRC and the Town and Country Planning Authority. With a we first went to the Technical Review Committee, then to the authority with a submission, and an approval was granted, and the Port Authority was granted permits and licenses for the development. I'll make one other comment. We consider, as I said, this area is very important. So we decided that we had to ensure that the necessary monitoring and enforcement was in place. So we deem this to be, and we normally classify these as a special monitoring list. So every day, every other day, one of the directors here, their teams are there monitoring what the Port Authority does. We can say that the Port Authority and its contractors have been very compliant, more or less. There have been some minor issues which we have dealt with, but the work is proceeding, and we are confident that the resources, the natural resources in the area will not be impacted negatively.
Did you put any stipulations, anything that had to be done as contingent on this development?
Many chairman probably professors tell you that there were too many.
Yeah, but any major, I mean, I don't want to know about,
yes,
you know, I mean.
Yes, we had many stipulations.
What are the big things that you would
The beach works, there were specific conditions for the beach work, for the mooring. Professor spoke about even refurbishing that area for the fisher folks. The Port Authority was required to obtain the necessary approval. They had to do the technical work, the beach works, the assessment of the marine environment, etc. So we went through all of that. There is also some work the Port Authority needs to do and is continuing to do, and this is with the treated effluent. Although it is going to be discharged in the mangrove area, we have cautioned them, and we are working as to flows and the quality of effluent that is allowed.
So it's a secondary system?
It's a tertiary system.
Okay, it's a tertiary system.
Tertiary treatment system. We would not have approved secondary.
No, well, I don't know. Yes. All right, so, and you had stipulated the sewage, and you have there's no timeline on it, it's just a general.
The Port Authority is installing a modular system, meaning system is being installed now, and as the build out for the development of the area, additional modules can be added, which is the sort of concept that is being done now. But for the 20th, when vessel arrive, there will be treatment systems in place.
Okay, it will be completed, the sewage will be completed by the end of this month?
It will be completed as in the capacity for the town and so on and so on. But it will be functional.
No.
It will be functional.
It will be functional. Yes.
Just back to the strategic environmental assessment that UDC said has not been completed as yet. I just want to find out from Sir Knight, if it was a private developer doing that, Port Royal as an attraction, would they have to get that assessment first before the build out? And the reason why, just as the chairman asked, you know, you're going to be bringing in additional persons within the town itself. And we're really doing the impact assessment after you have already been bringing in cruise ships. Would that be the norm, though?
And the answer is no. I think what MD was trying to explain is the strategic environmental impact assessment is looking at the entire Port Royal, terrestrial and marine.
No, I got that.
Terrestrial and marine, but within that construct, this is a one development part of it.
We understand the development part, which
Yes.
you did before.
Yes.
We're talking about the wider, the town itself and the environs outside of the port itself, which is what was
MD is
said
saying,
by Brian,
yes.
that
Yes.
is now being done. But we have ships coming in, 4 ships coming in within the next month.
Yes.
So,
But remember, the strategic environmental impact assessment is wider than just the area that is now being developed and the vessel that is coming. I think what I understood from what was being said, and which is what we understand, we have been working with the UDC, is the UDC is looking at all impacts, housing, whatever is to be built, constructed in that wide area, and is doing a strategic assessment of all of these cumulatively, not only just the port. So the port development will become a part of that strategic
which
impact
is what?
assessment. Yes.
yeah, all right. Go.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Knight, you speak of the tertiary system that you have approved. I have a little concern in that, given the very limited area within which you're operating in that area, did you make it a stipulation that the operators of the facility consider converting the discharge into, say, liquid fertilizer? Because I have this idea that if you discharge very small microliters over a short time, there's no issue. But if you then run that over a period of 10, 15 years, you could get into a situation where the area becomes toxic. And so that is against that background which I asked that question.
Thank you, member. 2 things. The efficiency of the treatment modality is going to be primary in all of this. That's the first point I'd like to make. Remember, based on what MD UDC is saying, as we go forward with the further developments, then the treated effluent could become a source of treated wastewater for irrigation and for other aspects of the development. So that will be negated, and that is part of the plan. In other words, and the President of the Water Commission, I'm not going to comment on this is his forte. But we have been, as part of, what we call this, smart development, is to reuse circular economy, that nothing goes to waste. But the Water Commission, I know, is also looking at how best to reuse all of these resources, and probably the President may wish to comment on that.
All right. Let's move on to. Oh, sorry. Member Daly. All right.
Thank you very much. Mr. Knight, I do not know if you can tell me now what time frame in terms of NEPA to make sure that NEPA is satisfied with the entire development over there. What time frame are you giving yourself, or what time frame do you think you need to ensure? Because I know of a fact that when these things start, Chairman, and it is going well, sometimes the input of NEPA is sometimes disregarded until you start having difficulty. Then you hear what NEPA did not do and what Water Commission did not do. So I need to find out from you now, what is your timeline if you are giving the 2-month or the 3-month for a startup, but there are some fundamental things that need to be put in place in order to mitigate any kind of disaster that will take place over there over a long-term period. I would want to find out from you now, what time frame are you looking at?
Well, member, through the chair, I hope I understand your question properly. But for the Port and Harbour development, the time frame is continuous. There has to be ongoing monitoring and enforcement. Remember, the environmental permit lasts for 5 years until it comes up for renewal. So over that period, the monitoring and enforcement would be continuous. So that's the first point. Remember also, because of the nature of the area being a protected area and a Ramsar site, the interest and the attention would be that more intensive. The Port Authority may say, why, and I'm sure I've heard that already, why you guys visiting every day or every 2 days. So we are visiting. Now, when UDC completes the plan, then that would give us a good tool for planning overall as to how we project for monitoring over time.
Okay. All right. Let me move now to the NWC. Mr. Barnett, how are you, sir? I thought you'd be down in Westmoreland dealing with some water projects. I notice here that there are a number of issues. I suppose you're collaborating with the sewage plant that will be operated by Port Authority, or, well, I don't know what the time will be. And I see here some suggestions of an upgrade of water supply. Could you sort of tell us your input and
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
overview? Yes.
And let me wish for you and the rest of the members a prosperous and successful 2020. But just to say, we have been at the table from inception in terms of the overall concept, both for water and sewage services for the entire Port Royal. So when we looked at what is to be done and focusing now on the advanced work of the Port Authority of Jamaica, we were very minded of what is likely to come even after the pier is developed. And so we had reached consensus that it is most appropriate and more of a long-term vision for Port Royal to have, rather than a system, and I'm speaking wastewater treatment now, that serves just the port, we would make it into an area-wide system to include the areas within Port Royal that is currently not sewered, and that section on the southeastern side, meaning near to Gloria's, if everybody know where that is, that housing scheme also be included. So the decision was taken because of the advancement of the Port Authority's work to really locate a sewage treatment plant outside of the confines of the port itself, because it is understood eventually that NWC may be the operator of the system going forward when we start to have more retail connection. Retail meaning the individual houses connecting to that system. So as Prof has indicated, and rightfully so, the system is being developed in a modular way to take the immediate needs, but we recognize, based on the nature of the work that will be done, there will be some forward installation that will be required. So when Port Authority doing those promenades, etc., we will be there to ensure that the infrastructure is in place. It may not necessarily be connected to be used immediately, because it also will be informed by the other works that UDC would be doing and all of that. But we want to make sure that once certain construction is happening, the necessary infrastructure both for water distribution and the new sewer system. So we'll be renewing the water supply distribution system and installing a new sewage system, especially in areas where none exist. We have,
So that's an ongoing, that's a project.
it is part of what, right, ongoing. So in this year's budget, when I mean this year, 2021 budget, which is when most of the real work is expected to commence, there is allocation
The real work
to
being,
deal with that.
the real work for Port Royal
For Port Royal,
water.
and sewage.
But, so you, so that will be when you intend to really begin the upgrade of that.
So what we,
But I see, and the figure for that is the same,
what
have
figure
a
do you have?
500 million.
Well, the combined amount for both water and sewage is, yeah, a little bit above that. We about 500-600 in as the most current estimate.
But that does that include? That doesn't include the sewage plant.
It does not include the sewage treatment plant. Port Authority will put in the first module of the sewage treatment plant.
So-
But what we're talking about now is the collection, pumping stations that will be required, and the water supply distribution network.
All right. So it would be, just for clarity, so it's five. You said 600 million for water upgrade.
My current estimate, just if you allow me, Chair, to just outline it for water,
Yeah.
it is 300 million estimated.
Okay. All right.
Which one? Okay. Oh, okay. So I'm being clarified here. Sorry, Chair. So it's two phases, and I just overread one actually. It's right here. So we have the transmission main to upgrade from Airport Palisades Roundabout all the way into Port Royal. That is about 295 million. Then we're looking at internally of the town itself, and all of that is just about 300 million. So just the water alone is coming out to just
600.
Roughly 600 million. Yeah.
Just
the water.
I mean, yeah, that's just the water.
Just the water.
And the sewage?
We estimate this.
Your element of it.
Right. So my chief engineer has just reminded me that the pumping stations for the sewage should come out just under 200 million, roughly, and the network, meaning the collection system, is another 300 million. So we're looking at almost $1 billion of infrastructure work.
And that's separate from?
So how it works now, this is just the pipeline, in a simple sense, and pumping station. The module for the facility.
Actual processing of it.
Right. So Port Authority has always budgeted to put in a module. So
that's your 500 million, Prof. Oh, sorry, you're right, 300.
Right.
Yes.
The other aspect of the sewage expansion now will come as we expand the whole development plan within the town, which would be guided by the overall strategic master plan.
Sorry, Prof, you're only 135. I said 135, not 300. 135. So, right. Okay, just a concern that jumps up on me. How are you going to prevent, in doing these pipes from Harborview and enlarging of the pipes, how are you going to prevent not mashing up the road? our new road.
There's no new road there just yet. Just to clarify, I know the MP would probably support me on that, but we have had challenges with the existing pipeline, and everyone knows that the water table along that stretch is very high. In those days, those pipes were laid in the sand. Over time, those metals would have corroded, eventually rotten, eventually got broken, etc. and it creates a problem in identifying leak in our water. So, so we are looking to more or less utilize above ground in some way. If not above ground, we'll then look at the different material that could be utilized. Above ground give visibility. You can easily identify where there's a leak. But the problem that we may have is, and I'm sad to say, but the behavior of those who use the roadway is also a risk when you put pipeline on a very narrow stretch.
Yes.
Without much space.
Well, I was just really saying it because the road out there now is not bad. I mean, the whole environment of it, and we just are hoping when this work is being done that we don't, destroy. The time frame for this work is what?
So right
2021?
now, it will be executed predominantly in the current budget period, which is 2020-2021.
The next budget?
Right.
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah, in the upcoming budget period.
All right. So members, I'm going to ask that we could have the discussions with NEPA and water. And so at the end of that, I can, if we would like, we could relieve them, and then we could go back to the basic. We have heritage trust tourism and to deal with the issue itself. But I would like to relieve some of the members. So I open up the questions.
I'm going to suggest, Chairman, because there are a couple issues.
Overarching.
Right. And I think NEPA's role is quite crucial to that.
All right.
I suspect the Water Commission, they have been very clear. So probably you could put questions to them and release them.
All right. Member Campbell.
President Barnett, I have a concern. The volume of water that you're expected to use in that area with a new development, what is the projected volume?
The projected volume is just about 250,000 gallons, but bear in mind that
that's inclusive of ship sales?
That would be like your peak demand, so to speak, meaning when your cruise ship is in port. But to support that, as Prof would probably explain later, Prof would be putting up its own storage on the port as well, and then we already have an existing storage, albeit that serves the general community of Port Royal. So that would be the anticipated volume.
So you don't anticipate any drawdown from the sources which,
well, of course, certainly. So we would have just recently activated a well source at Rennock Lodge, which would have augment supply into that area. Again, how the water supply network is set up, it would involve also the other project that we're also planning to give a more long-term sustainability of supply, which is the Ryacobre water treatment plant, wherein when you move water from the other sources, for example, Mona and all of those well sources along that stretch. So we have two wells serving that general area. We have the Long Mountain well, the Rennock Lodge well. It is augmented by the Mona water treatment system, and also from the Ryacobre system even now. So that is part of the supply zone. I know you're smiling, member, because water is moving transboundary, and I know there is always the issue of moving water across watersheds.
You're very right on Mr. Barnett, because it's ironic that I represent an area where the Water Resources Authority tells me that I can't procure a license for the extraction of water in the Guys Hill or in the Glengorf region. I can't get it. And those people live there, and that water comes into the Rio Cobre, and it is siphoned off, if I may so use that kind of language, to to Kingston and all the other areas. So that's, it's, we continue to deprive all these areas and send it to the other areas. And I'm not quarreling with the use of the water, but the fact is there doesn't seem to be any equity in how you distribute. Because I have a very, very serious issue grappling with. We have thousands of people in the Geisel area who don't at any point have a gallon of water. And the state machinery is saying to them, well, listen, you can't get any, but the other people, no matter where they come from, they're entitled. So it's, I have a real challenge with that. And if that is the mandate which you have, I perhaps have to ask that you have it revised, because there doesn't seem to be any equity in it at all.
So, if I may just briefly, because I don't wish to step across the jurisdiction of others who regulate my own entity. So as it relates to abstraction from any particular source, NWC goes through the same regime. In fact, we have to pay annually to extract every gallon of water that we take from whatever source. So from that perspective, I just wish to clarify that whole arrangement.
All right, members, are there any more questions for the National Water Commission? If so, Mr. Barnett, let me thank you, and you're welcome to stay if you would like. You're always welcome, but you may feel the need to rush off and provide water elsewhere. So all right, thank you. Okay, members, we have with us the Heritage Trust and Ministry of Tourism, among others, and of course SDCs here, who were referred to earlier. Briefly, I think maybe if we could just jump into the National Heritage Trust, just to hear the overview, or at least if you could just conjoin the Ministry of Culture. Is that, no, you fall under separate? Yes, right, you fall under, so, but they are, it's entertainment and culture, so the extent to which? All right, well, let me hear what the input,
Ministry of Culture?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. We would probably want to begin by joining with Professor Shirley in underscoring the historical and culturally rich properties of Port Royal, which have won for the area pride of place as a cultural heritage tourism destination in Kingston. That's the point of departure for us, the ministry. Through its agency, the Jamaica National Heritage Trust has had a role in the Port Royal development, providing in the first instance a no objection in July 2018 to the development request received from the Port Authority of Jamaica. Subsequent to that, in May
to the development of the port, or any specific project? Just general?
the development of the port,
Oh,
as I understand it.
Go ahead, yes.
And then conducting in May 2019 an archaeology impact assessment on the old Cold Wharf and engaging around a license agreement for the development and upgrade of the facilities of the fort. The archaeology and estate divisions of the JNHT monitor the development of the Cold Wharf terminal building and floating pier, the Seawalk, as well as Fort Charles. The ministry itself has carried out in Port Royal economic opportunities interventions. The first phase was completed in June last year, focusing on training in batik, chasing and repoussé, as well as beading and jewelry making. The second phase will focus, Chair and members, on culinary and food production. Both phases represent efforts to ready the residents to capitalize on the opportunities this initiative represents. Fort Rocky will be developed as an entertainment zone. Rehabilitation and construction works will be carried out by JNHT itself. Our ministry will also be part of the edutainment at the first and succeeding ports of call for cruise ships. The capacity building exercises to which I referred would have had partners in the JBDC, UNESCO, the Social Development Commission, among others. Overall, we work to ensure that the necessary balance is maintained between preservation and development. So the JNHT can assist.
So you said you did some training?
Sorry?
You did some training out there? How many people did you?
30 in phase 1. We had registered.
Is that the same 30 that Prof?
Who did the batik also wanted to participate in storytelling and tour guiding and so on. So there's an overlap with, you know.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Okay. Yes, JNHT.
Good afternoon, Chair. The JNHT, as you may know, was established to protect and to promote the tangible heritage of Jamaica. Port Royal is an extremely important site internationally as well as nationally. The port was established in 1656, right after the English took over. And as such, it was a very important slave trading site, the site of memory for the slave trade, as well as you may know, it was a pirating a site with pirating and privateering, and hence the Port Royal became really the richest city in the Western Hemisphere. So, as you may know, the earthquake in 1692, 2/3 of the city sunk beneath the sea at the time. So we have 13 acres underwater. The JNHT, under its Act of 1985, protects and regulates not just Port Royal, but all the protected national heritage sites in Jamaica. But as you may be aware, Port Royal has a special place in the whole history of Jamaica, extremely special. We are delighted to be a part of the whole development with the PAAC, and we have worked very closely with the PAAC as well as the UDC in terms of their plans. And all development works must come to the JNHT for approval. All works. We have a technical committee that vets everything. Prof will tell you that, well, is that always satisfied because we keep going backward and forward from time to time, as we may not be, you know, we may not see eye to eye on certain kinds of development because everything has to go through an archaeological impact assessment. We have to be there monitoring everything at all times. So we have our estate department as well as our archaeological department with them, both at the old Colin Wharf as well as at Fort Charles. All works, all signs, all scripts have to come to the JNHT for vetting, so we can ensure that when it comes to scripts and so on, everything is authentic. We have our research department that ensures that all that is done. So we see ourselves as an integral part in this whole project, and the one thing we have to remember is that Port Royal is an archaeological site. It's not any old site. So as you dig in the earth, you're going to come up with artifacts, and everything that comes up, we have to ensure that, you know, we actually, that is actually captured in our inventories. When we have whole pieces that come up, because we have things that, I mean, we have artifacts from the 17th century, even artifacts from the pre-Columbian time, because it was a major taino site as well. So it's not just about the English, it was a major taino site. So everything that is found there, whole pieces, that is sent to the Institute of Jamaica for exhibition purposes, right? So even when we find the fragments, we will put them together and we'll send them to the Institute of Jamaica. So we preserve the history of the country. We have here, we have two very experienced archaeologists here. We have Mr. Doric Glay, one of our consultant archaeologists, who really has a great amount of expertise in underwater archaeology. As you know, a lot of our artifacts are underwater, right? So that is something that we, right now, it is preserved as it is. Most of the artifacts are under probably about 3 or so, a good amount of silt, right? So it's not really there laying that on top of the water that somebody can dive and take them up. It's covered, right? So we have a lot of, in terms of exploratory work to do there, and therefore we keep our presence in Port Royal, and we look forward to.
But are you doing any, other than regulator, are you doing anything?
Yes, we are. It is continuous.
No, other than regulatory, you have any projects?
Any projects? No projects right now in terms of expend. Just with the PAAC, the Fort Rocky project, which we are hope to be doing with the UDC down the road, where we are removing a building, a modern building in there, so we can get it up to speed, so it can become an entertainment center. But that's not a part of the town right now. But we're doing that. So our role is mainly regulatory and ensuring that the heritage is protected.
All right, thank you, Ms. Creed-Nelson. All right, the Ministry of Tourism, in terms of this project, I don't know who's taking the lead, but in terms of this project, are there any elements of it that you are actually effecting now? In other words, what has happened certainly in places like Falmouth and Ocho Rios is that Ocho Rios was a long-standing port, but we had to upgrade it to the promenade, the roads, do a lot of work. Falmouth, a fairly new port, we realized that in building the port, we then had to go retroactively and do all the streetscape. We're now trying to finish off some other projects to build it out. I think we want to ensure that we learn by example and not create. So the Tourism Enhancement Fund, get back into this, make the same mistakes again. So what projects are you doing now? I mean, big projects to enhance this product that is being done.
All right, thank you, Chairman and members, and good afternoon, everyone. So we recognize what you said about the other ports and the development. And
is your mic working? The name. Yes.
Oh, I'm Kerry Wallace, Executive Director of the Tourism Enhancement Fund. And so we have worked closely with both the UDC and the Port Authority on this project, allowing them to take the lead for the most part, because the Port Authority, the project manager on it. From a tourism perspective, we've partnered with the signage, and we are partnering with the theming of Port Royal.
The what? The
theming.
Oh.
We have invested 9 million Jamaican to date in supporting the creation of the signs and the installation of the signs as well, in keeping
$9 million.
9 million Jamaican. The TPDCO is here as well, and Jambak will speak more to the marketing TPDCO towards the training and a few licensing and tour guide training as well.
But just as a matter of interest, one of the difficulties we had, certainly with Falmouth, is that we built the port and then retroactively opened the port in 2011, thereabouts. In the following 2 years or a year later, we started the streetscape program, which is going on 5-6 years now, just trying to get the town right, because there's a saying that nothing kills a bad product like good marketing. If we're going to bring a person you want to put in, so the Tourism Enhancement Fund really was put in place to sort of do or to assist with the funding of some of these big projects. So you'd figure if a Port Royal is coming on scheme, that we would be looking at some of the, what would be done to enhance it in a real way. So,
and we understand and agree. There are a couple of things. One is, as Prof said, it's a gateway into Kingston, Destination Kingston, which, as you would have heard from the previous cruise calls, the guests that came out went back on board very ecstatic about the experience. And so we are confident that the Kingston experience will give them a great time. While we develop Port Royal, which as we've heard today, is a very sensitive area for development. And so with the heritage, with the architectural restrictions, it is one that will take time. Nevertheless, you can have confidence that we are proceeding in a way that we're developing the Port Royal, supporting the development of Port Royal in accordance with UDC's master plan and in accordance with how it is being packaged to the passenger who is on the cruise when they make that call to Port Royal. On top of that, we are ensuring that the attractions in and around Kingston are prepared and well suited to accommodate the passengers that come off the cruise.
All right. Okay, I don't know if there's anything else.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and members. From the TPDCO perspective, I'm Andrew Spencer, Executive Director of the Tourism Park Development Company. Our involvement has been on the softer side. We have Team Jamaica certified 31 individuals from the community. And well, Team Jamaica is a prerequisite for our tour guide training, and then we've certified 19 in tour guiding. So those individuals will be ready to execute on day one. We were given the listing. We took guidance from the project lead, from the Port Authority of Jamaica, and so we engaged, we trained, and we think they're ready to go. The cost of that to us was a little over $1 million Jamaican dollars. So that has been our intervention to this point.
All right. Okay. Member Paul, I think you want.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I suspect I'm going to be the briefest of our colleagues over here because of my familiarity with the project. I just have three areas I wanted to cover. I mentioned that I'll be brief because after a rough start, in that the project really started without the direct involvement of the political leadership in the area. We've had tremendous improvement in that relationship, and so both the Port Authority and the UDC have been in direct consultation with the political leadership. And I really want to emphasize the importance of that. Chairman and all our colleagues here will attest to that, because one of my main concerns, as it would be ours, is for a cruise ship to land and you have unsmiling faces, people who are upset about people coming into their space when there are existing and prevailing problems. And in this case, these problems existed across administration, and we acknowledge them. So my involvement initially was to ensure that some of the long-standing problems, infrastructure problems, were addressed, because I did not believe at the outset that they were. So I'm very pleased and excited that the sewage plant is going to be modular to extend to the town. I'm very pleased about the water situation, which has been perennial, and we have been trying to get this done for many years, is going to be addressed. And of course, Chairman, we've had a long-standing housing problem. I think the Port Authority will acknowledge, because they have involved me in the details of the implementation, and it's probably a model. People don't understand what we do, but in the construction that is happening there, and I really thought it wasn't going to be possible. Because of the involvement of the leadership in the constituency, we were able to send message far and wide, because whenever there's a construction, people gravitate to the site and crowd the site and want work. And you will see that this is a remarkable project in that there was no crowding. People were told that, listen, it's heavy machinery, you are not going to be able to be employed here, and sometimes we don't get any credit for that, but I'm claiming some credit here. We've been working very closely with the Port Authority to achieve that. Our main problem that could have overturned all the work that we were doing is when some persons were notified close to Christmas that they are going to be removed from premises that they were either doing business or living. And I'm happy that we had a meeting with all the agencies along with Minister Vaz. It was a very good meeting because people were anticipating that on the 4th of January they were going to be bulldozed from their premises. Out of that meeting, it was interesting, and both the Port Authority and UDC acknowledged that this area that was under issue was not required now for the development to proceed, for what is unfolding to happen. There are longer term issues, and it will be good for both the UDC and Port Authority to acknowledge that at this meeting, just so that we're clear that this is not an issue for them at this time. And I'll pause for 2 seconds because I have 2 more questions to ask.
Well, member, you know we have been meeting often about this matter. It is important that we understand that really the planning is master planning for the entire area, and we do recognize that where there are people in particularly vulnerable areas, we need to address that. So I would not say that it is entirely put to rest, because people who are in vulnerable areas must be addressed. However, the core of what we're doing right now would not necessarily require a major intervention there. But I must again say that the vulnerability of our citizens must be given great consideration.
MP, yes, now let me acknowledge, Chairman, that we have had a frequent collaboration and update of the MP and received input from him on a number of areas. In respect of the movement of the squatters, the area that is affected, that at least the ones I see on the television, relate to persons on the Black Beach just past New Glorias and running along that beach where there are squatters. And we have no project in that area. But I underline, Chairman, that we are in support of the idea of the master plan and the fact that we know that housing solutions will inevitably form a part of what emerges out of that exercise.
Right. So the point I'm trying to make, Chairman, is that you have to deal with housing. It's a long-term issue. And really, that area that is in question now, there is no need to remove people immediately. I would like to raise another question in relation to that same matter, because at the good meeting we had with Minister Vaz, it was acknowledged that some of these persons, and I really hate the word squatter, the word squatting and squatter, because these persons are persons who born, grow, become adult in Port Royal. And in some cases, you find persons who are legitimately on land. That is, they are legal owners of land. Because the family has expanded, they have breached their boundaries in an effort to accommodate the expanded family. So what you have are boundary breaches, and I think that has to be treated separately from people who come from outside and just decide to take up residence. And I know that the NEPA was mandated to look at this issue along with the housing agency to see how we can accommodate those families who have breached their boundaries. And probably we could get a response from NEPA this time.
Chairman, member is very skillful, you know. So, so let me say, Chairman, I think what is related is correct. But we were asked to go with the NLA and the squatter management unit to verify exactly what the member just said about persons having tenure but have gone out of their tenured area onto the communal land. We did plan a date to do that, but we have deferred that in light of the tour that was done on Saturday. And it's, you recall, member, that we had agreed that the middle of the month that would have been done. Yes, and that was planned for today. But so you pull it out. So we have deferred that because of the high-level visit, and we don't want. We weren't there, so we don't know what commitment, what was said, and we don't want to, you know. So we are deferring that. But Chairman, member, I think you are aware, though, that the squatting, the major concern is the squatting that is taking place in the wetland, in the mangroves, and the destruction of those areas. Lands owned by the Commissioner of Lands and the Norman Manley International Airport Authority. We have been at this since 2016. There are probably about 60, you know, sheds and huts and living accommodation. Some have been removed by the Airports Authority. They are under enforcement notice, both the Airport Authority and the Commissioner of Lands, to remove those squatters, and we are persisting on those. So we want to make that clear, that the persons who are squatting in those areas have to be removed for the protection of those areas. So I just thought I'd clarify.
Yes, and I think, Chairman, you need to understand what we're talking about, because I am dealing specifically with those persons who some weeks ago in that area, the bulldozers went to take them down. That is the area where these persons were born and grew up. I can't support squatting in the wetlands where people from all over come and decide that they're going to live there. That as MP, I see it as a different responsibility. I am dealing with those people who have breached their boundaries. And also, Chairman, I should be upfront. There are 3 commercial establishments around there as well. And the reason why I have been pleading with the UDC to consider these 3 establishments, firstly, they have been there for many, many years. There is a shortage. If you're bringing in 2,000 visitors in the city, and it is our intention to maximize the benefits, not to take 2,000 visitors into Kingston. You need places of entertainment and food. And one of these establishments that was due to be bulldozed was featured last week on television as a place for nice eateries in the absence of Fort Charles not being available this year to accommodate something that I celebrated yesterday. You know where I found myself last night? Eating the best fish, etc. is one of those places. And I really want to urge the government. Here is an opportunity to facilitate business. Here is an opportunity to provide some resources to enable these businesses to meet world-class standards, to do some refurbishing. But for heaven's sake, don't demolish them, because you're going to have some sad faces over there. And these are, Port Royal is a small place where people are all related, you know. So you affect one, you affect the entire town. And I'm asking, in fact, we have been able to secure some training already, and I want to thank the agencies for doing this. But we have to ensure that these businesses are not demolished at this time. if I could just raise one other issue of concern. We are anticipating hundreds of visitors. Port Royal is known for no crime. I don't get any credit for this, but it is, yes, when we have crime in Rockfort, people blame me. But Port Royal is known for no crime. I am wondering, because whilst I can assist in educating my people in East Kingston not to crowd our visitors, not to crowd the town, to allow the people of Port Royal to benefit. How are we? What is the plan for public safety? Because I fear for my people too, and yes, we are concerned about the tourists, but what is going to happen next week when everybody in Kingston is aware that these people are coming into Port Royal one way in, one way out? What is the security plan for that? I think that's a fundamental issue that has to be addressed.
So Chairman, if I could probably take that question. There are two sides to it, Chairman. When I was presenting, I didn't highlight the fact that beyond bringing people to Port Royal, there will be a number of excursions and so on that are going out into the Greater Kingston. We view this project as being an important way of creating a gateway into Kingston. And so I want to address, first of all, the issue of, because it has been raised at various times, sort of overwhelming Port Royal. And it is the plans are there to prevent that from happening. If you want, I can give you a sense of the kind of tours that are going to be done. The thing that MP Paulwell is asking about is what are the security arrangements. What I can say, Chairman, is that the JCF at the very highest level of a DCP, ACP, have been working with TPD called security arm, with PAJ security arm to coordinate a security plan for the Port Royal area, as well as the general safety of the passengers as they move around the corporate area. I don't have the full information on all of the plans, Chairman, and even if I did, I'd want to be cautious about disclosing that for a variety of reasons. But I know that they have taken into account, MP Paulwell, that whole issue of controlling the access to Port Royal by persons who are descending on the area, whether those be robot taxis or others. They are working on some plans to control that.
But I just want to say, Chairman, there is one police station in Port Royal with very few police officers. I don't want to hear the precise details, but again, every year we do a seafood festival over there. And every year we see the characters coming in, and we have therefore had to develop a plan for that. And that is just a couple hours. If you're going to be having cruise ships coming from time to time, the people who live in Port Royal, they need increased security.
So, Chairman, I just want to be clear that my understanding is that the reliance will not be only on the police that are in Port Royal, and that's why it was elevated to the level that it was elevated to ensure that the challenges that you have spoken about don't descend. I think that there are other issues in relationship to the continued security of the area, and I note that the Prime Minister has addressed some of those in his public statements on the matter, and he has highlighted that when he has met with the combined group of all the people who are here, he has met with us and including both the JCF and JDF, and he has given them the charge, and Coast Guard, and he has given them the charge to address this matter. So what I'm saying, and I know in the planning, in the detailed planning, the person who is heading the JCF is at the DCP level.
And just finally, we are very pleased about some of the expenditures being done, house improvement. I'd like to know how much is being allocated for that. Secondly, I am aware of the development at Fort Rocky. These are happening without the political leadership's knowledge. So for accountability, we'd like to know how much is being spent and what is that project all about. And
which one is that?
The Fort Rocky development. So it's housing, Fort Rocky development.
In terms of the housing improvement that we spoke about, MP, which would be along the streets, the main streets, the budget that we have is for $17 million.
When is that?
Pardon?
When is that?
That's now, right now. And
it's ongoing.
Pardon?
It's ongoing.
It's ongoing, and the expectation is the works will be completed by Saturday.
There's a contractor in place?
There's a contractor in place.
Now, how was that procured?
Through a transparent procurement process, but I know that the contractor is using large numbers of persons from, most of the workmen are from
Port Royal.
Are local, he's using people from Port Royal.
The Fort Rocky development.
Well, the Fort Rocky development, at present, we are looking to take out, there's a modern building inside there, so we can have more space for any event in reggae month. So that contract, I think, is out, what, 8.2 million? You will be updated on that, MP member, as to, because I believe a contractor has been selected and workers will also be coming from the community as well.
And the funding is from?
The funding is from the JNHD.
Good.
We are working along with the UDC as well for some additional. This project is in phases, right? So we will be building out in the next year or two, right? But we wanted an area where we could have a significant event in Port Royal at this time.
How was the contractor selected?
Well, it was selected, limited contract, selected. In transparency with our procurement committee, it was selected within that. Right.
A member Witter just wanted a follow-up briefly.
Follow-up question in relation to Member Paulwell's input. A question to UDC. Just want to find out why these observations that Member Paulwell made in relation to dislocation of residents and commercial business, why this observation is now coming at the back end when you would have had a master plan?
One would wonder, that is definitely a, why yes.
Why? Yeah. Why these observations are coming at the back?
Okay, well, I can't speak for the Commissioner of Lands, but these are occupants on the Commissioner on Crown lands, and as NRC indicated, they would have made enforcement on it for some time. In fact, though I know people were addressed recently, I do know that notices were given from long before, over a year before that. There were notices. It wasn't sudden or new. It was just when they came, there were some concerns. But again, I can't speak to the timelines that were already established through the Commission of Lands and through NEPA's enforcement requests. But I can say that a number of the people, specifically that member was referring to, are on beach lands, which would be very high-risk places to settle. So those are areas that anybody doing development on beachlands would have to address a number of things and a number of vulnerabilities. And so they are very vulnerable areas, and they were areas identified for quite some time.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Thank you. Chairman, through you to Prof. Gordon and Ms. Pinnock. MP member Paul Wells spoke about the security aspect. I'm not certain if I heard any plans coming out for the retrofitting of the Port Royal police station. There is a station there with 9 members. Security is going to be a major issue when we have the current capacity being improved. What plans are there to improve on infrastructure? And the other one has to do with health. There's a health center there also where a doctor comes in once per month. What plans are there to improve on the health facilities there, since we're going to be having thousands of persons coming in?
I suspect you were prompted by the MP behind you.
Member, let me address the police station first. So as a part of some of what you heard in response from Prof. Shirley is regarding the first visit of the ship. However, as I had mentioned, as part of the long-term master planning, safety and security are a big part of the long-term planning. Some of what we will be doing, indeed, when the first few ships come, is monitoring what happens, where people go, and that will be included. An assessment of what happens will also be included in the master planning. So we will have an opportunity to see what happens. I should also mention that one of the consultancies, the strategic environmental assessment, will look at a carrying capacity. So we'll look at what are the capacities of the areas within Port Royal. And again, that relates to how many people can move through, what can happen. So that's a part of the overall review that's happening. Regarding the police station specifically, and indeed the health center, a part of our master planning looks at what are the facilities. We have been working and meeting with specifically Area 1 and also very specifically with Inspector Warren and her team. She identified about 16 people use the station actually. And so what we have been doing is working with them to understand their needs and the state of what they have now, and what would be the required improvements. In fact, a big part of it is looking at what are the community services that would need to be provided and how we would best house them. So you would look at what exists, what are interim positions, particularly as we look at the influx of new opportunities. It's not just people, but new opportunities too in that regard. Also with health, we've been working with health primarily in looking at vector control over the rainy season, really. I shouldn't even just say Christmas, over the rainy season, but also what are the long-term plans and how those can be facilitated. So those are some of the things that will come out of the larger master plan.
Prof. Shirley, I think, all right, what we've been trying to do today is to find out what plans are in place and how we are. And I think you'll understand that all of us here, philosophically, we're fully in agreement with a project to really get Kingston into the cruise shipping business, and that Port Royal has a strong brand name. So what we really want to ensure is that everything is on board, ready for the project, and I think a lot of these questions, for example, the police station and health center, theoretically, I think everybody here agrees that it needs expanding. What we really need to know is not the affirmation that it needs expanding, as Ms. Pinnock said, but the fact also is are there funds in place to do it? So, so if we don't really have those in place now, well, we recognize it, but we may not have that. But what I want to sort of get to is, having looked at this project, the nuts and bolts now, the sort of finances, you have indicated that the budget fundamentally is about 45 million US. That was your number. We've been working around, I've noticed of that the Water Commission is about $1 billion. I don't know if that's included in your 45 as a separate. So let us try and get this into one currency. So should we use Jamaican or US, just to get an idea? 45 million would be approximately, what, 6? About 6? Well,
6 billion.
6 billion. And then, of course, let's put the Water Commission aside because they're long-standing issues. Now, so the 6 billion, and this is a project that comes from the Ministry of Economic Growth. This is, so basically started with in the Falmouth project, there was a plan that looked over a 10-year period or thereabouts to try and mitigate and to pay for it with the partners in the cruise line. What is your business plan for this Falmouth port? Sorry, my mistake. For the Port Royal port, and where does the funding come from? Is it a subvention from Ministry of Finance? Are monies borrowed by Port Authority, or are they borrowed by government as a bigger project? How is it funded, and what sort of your business plan? In other words, where are the revenue streams and how do they satisfy the project?
So, Minister, let me begin with the conversion. The 45 would convert to 5.7 billion Jamaican. The issue of the source of funding, these are funded, this particular project is funded by the PAAC. We have approvals from the Ministry of Finance for the expenditures. These expenditures come from our operating revenues and by funds that we have borrowed for our general project portfolio. We are in the process of managing a process or implementing a process to reduce our debt level, but we do have to raise funds from time to time, and we have been able to do this without having to provide guarantees and so on. And so it is being raised on the basis of the strength of the project and our operating revenues and
so
performance.
the funds you have raised for this are from
domestic
sort of institutions or
domestic financial institutions.
So local banks.
Yes,
Sort of
NCB in particular.
NCB.
And that
yes,
was
particularly.
that was a tender process again, which they would have won.
So, all right, and so you have borrowed approximately.
Well, Elva Williams-Richards is here and she can probably elaborate, but my take on it, Minister, is that some of these funds are from our internally generated processes and some from the pool of funds that we borrow to support the entire project portfolio, because that's how we operate, right? So there will be a shortfall.
And you pick it up on
and
the
we'll pick it up on, but we didn't go out specifically to borrow on one particular project. We borrow on the basis of the portfolio that we are.
So this is your initial sort of expenditure. Now, what are your revenue streams over the next, say, 5 years? What are the plans going forward? How many ships do you expect over, say, the next 3 years? What do you have in the pipeline now?
What I would say, Minister, specific to the plan, obviously we would like to get to the point where we have the kind of relationships with one or more lines that give you a long-term commitment to a certain number of passengers, because that's the basis on which, and that's what we use in Falmouth. Recall, however, that Falmouth was a project that was done because the Oasis class vessel needed homes, and there were none in the Caribbean to facilitate it, and so RCCL structured a particular deal. In this particular case, there are two things to bear in mind, MP. You know the industry fairly well. So the itineraries that normally come out of the United States, the 7-day itineraries that come out, the North Coast terminals are much more favorable than a terminal where they have to come around the island to get to the South Coast and go around to get back up to go to Cayman or Cozumel or somewhere else. And it's for that reason that the initial take-up from the American-based vessels was not as large. The Europeans tend to spend a much longer time on the cruises, and it is not surprising then that there is a lot of take-up or interest from the European lines. I would say, pardon? That there is. And I would say that we are pleasantly surprised by the interest that is now being shown already, not just by the European tours now, but the Americans themselves, because I think they have gotten a sense that this is not a pipe dream any longer, that it is going to happen.
Something is developing, yes.
That it is developing. So I would say the bookings for next year, I apologize that I don't have all the numbers here, but it is substantially greater than we have for...
How many do we have this year?
We have 4 cruise calls this year.
How many?
4.
4 calls.
They're all from Mariella.
Right, the Mariella will come once a month.
Pardon? Yes, they're coming once per month. And after that, we have a number of other lines that will come on board for next year. And 23 is already an expansion, 2022 would be an expansion on this. So we see that process being built. In the business plan that you're asked about, Minister, let me say that they are, from my perspective, decisions that are sometimes made from a policy perspective as against a purely commercial, on a purely commercial basis. So if we were a private sector firm and looking at a portfolio of projects, maybe we wouldn't invest on this project. We would be looking at other projects where you have a more guaranteed source of revenue and so on. But that's what distinguishes a public enterprise organization that takes input from the policymakers that says, in the interest of growth, even if you had some other area as a more favorable location for the next port, Kingston has to be dealt with because of the challenges that Kingston faces. And it's in that context, Chairman, that the Port Royal project was an imperative for us to do, given the directives that we have received from the policymakers to get this done. We are not doing this, however, without thinking about the returns that we would get. And so when we do the projections, there will be a period that it's difficult because you're not getting the high returns, but already we think that by year 4, year 5, we'll have gotten to break-even point and beyond that, based on what we have seen so far. So remember, this is a 30-year investment. The other thing that I would say, Chairman, is that I think you know the numbers for cruise ports. So we have been frugal in the way that we have gone about doing this. So 45 million is not a large number for cruise development, but we have kept it tight within that while not compromising in any way the quality of the product that we think we'll be able to provide. And that's an important way of managing the risk, because that's what you're really focused on. Are we borrowing, or are we taking on something that you will not be able to return, and it becomes a burden on the entity or the government? And we don't see this as becoming a burden on either PAJ or the government of Jamaica.
Prof, again, as I said, some of these things are policy, and I don't disagree with you, but there is a need for us as a committee and Parliament to sort of have some idea of what the investment and what the return on the investment would be. Hence the questions I was asking with this. So in terms of, say, the Falmouth development, the arrangement was with Royal Caribbean over a period of time, and they increased there was an arrangement that helped with the development of that port, so that over a 10-year period, the amount that was paid on the head tax could pay over a 10-year period for the development, and then you're left with the development. What do you expect to be in the first few years? What is it that you expect to get out of, say, the head tax? I heard you specifically say that you have gotten for want of a better word, a waiver or a dispensation, something that allowed you not to get the head tax for Port Royal. Is that correct? Or is there some, I didn't, maybe I didn't get it.
I simply pointed out that we had asked for a waiver on the import duties that are paid on the materials and so on that are being used in the terminal, and we have received that from the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah, but I thought you would have got that as a state agency by norm.
No, not at all. Not our state agency.
So the head tax would be the normal $15.
Yes.
And you're expecting how many persons, say, in your first year?
The first year would be 2,500 by 4, about 10,000. That increases substantially in the second year, 35,000, and then it rises again in the third year, and by the fourth year we think we are at a level where we would be in a position to be breaking even. And
in terms of operations?
In terms of both operations and capital. That is, right now we're going to have to absorb, because of the lower numbers, some of the capital. But this is a 30-year project, MP.
Well, that's it. So you have a business plan for it?
Yes.
Okay, because that would be important, I think, for the committee to have a copy.
No, absolutely. I mean, none of our projects can we go into them without first having a business plan. I think your observation, the point I'm making, is that Falmouth, from day one, was going to break even because of the nature of the arrangement that you had with the cruise line. And I pointed out that the reason that we had that is that that cruise line had to have ports for this new ship.
Exactly. So there was a time for it. And I'm simply making the point that this is not the case with Port Royal. Yeah. So therefore, we are going to have to absorb, as a country, some costs for some years. So it was just for us to understand the magnitude of those costs, because despite the new technologies being used and it not being as expensive as the Falmouth project, it is still a substantial project.
But on the point, I accept your observations, Chairman. The point that, and I think we would agree on this, at moments in time, you have different kinds of imperatives. And so in 2010, 2011, RCCL had a particular imperative, and therefore had to put their money where their mouth was in order to get Jamaica to undertake the kind of investment that we made. In this particular case, Jamaica has an imperative. That imperative is to find a way to bring crews to Kingston. And so there is a risk that RCCL would have taken in 2011. We are taking that risk, and we are saying, Minister, that under no circumstance, based on our planning, do we expect to have to come to Ministry of Finance or to Parliament, cap in hand, and bail us out of this project. We don't see that based on the numbers that we are already seeing.
All right. Members?
I heard the Member of Parliament speaking to the equipments being used instead of manpower, but can you just say, in the short term and the medium term, what is there in terms of employment for the community and its environment?
Certainly in the short term, as the MP has said, there is employment being generated. And if you go on a project site today, you would be surprised to see how many people are over there working at this particular moment. It's a very busy place. If you go into the town, there's a lot of work going on. I went out there on Saturday night, and NWA was out there in full force. There were the painters and people going around. It was KCMC doing work. So there's a lot of short-term employment related to that. Your observation about or question about the long-term opportunities relate to the training which was done. There are going to be people who are getting an opportunity because of crafts. You heard the MP saying that there are going to be people who, for entertainment purposes, there's going to be a development of those. With Fort Charles and with the tours around the town of Port Royal, there will be people who are tour guides and storytellers. We hope in due course to have some pedicabs in there as well for the young men. There will be work for securing the terminal, but also the maintenance of the grounds care and so on. So there will be a number of jobs that are created. Those are in relationship to the primary project. But we have no intention of squeezing out or in any way interfering with private investments that will come to develop the opportunities that exist for pirate-themed locations, food establishments, and so on. We view, MP, this more as a process of catalyzing development, something to start it, something we all know that Port Royal, all of us have felt from we were children getting giddy in Giddy House, that this is an area that would create great opportunity. It has both an entertainment value mixed with a historical, archaeological thing, and the environment. It's just a special place, and we all knew that. The question was always, how do you spark it? How do you get it going? And it would be nice, MP, in all honesty, to say that everything was perfectly planned out before and so on, but there was we tried to show you, there was a policy decision that was made that we were going to bring it. There was an expediency associated with getting somebody to start, and we moved on that, and we already are seeing the effects of that. We have tried, I have no doubt, it's because in some respects we are being like the townspeople when we first went into Port Royal. When we went in, they said, yeah, we hear all of that already, Chief. When we see it, we believe it. Well, in a sense, Heather is saying some things, and I think we are saying, well, maybe I believe it is going to happen. In earnestness, I believe it is going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I believe that when these things occur, the private sector tends to rise to the occasion once you have de-risked some components of it sufficiently. When people are beginning to come, I believe that the developments that the Ministry of Culture is making to make Fort Rocky into an entertainment center, which combines with what we are doing at the port, all of those things that I believe are going to create a sense, an opportunity for economic growth for the people in Port Royal. Because I believe, and I suspect the MP could support us on this, that we have made every effort to ensure that nobody gets any work over there until you exhaust what the Port Royal people, what is there. And that will continue.
Just a quick follow-up. Well, it's really not a follow-up, it was another question. In regards to traffic management, because I realize this space over there, apart from that, the historical site and the delicacy of what is there to be preserved, what is the arrangement in terms of traffic management, in terms of the going back and forth. And I must tell you, I'm excited about the project as well, because I believe that Kingston and its environment, which includes Port Royal, is long overdue, and I am certain that tourists want to come and see what is happening in Kingston, because they know what is happening, with no disrespect to our chairman, on the North Coast. And I think it is quite timely that they see what is happening into Kingston and its environment. But I'm just a little bit curious about the traffic management.
Again, we using the input of TPDCO, who has dealt with some of the traffic management issues around the country, combined with the Police High Command. There is a plan that has been developed for how the traffic will be managed. I can say, MP, that there will be free movement of traffic in and out, but the process would entail trying to prevent people who are obviously coming out there to hustle, to make it a little bit more difficult for them to do that. But beyond that, I'd really prefer to have the Police High Command speak to it in the language that they would want to speak to it in, given that we know if you tell everybody what your plan is, Jamaicans are creative to get around your plan. So I'm confident that there will be the appropriate resources in place to manage traffic on the cruise ship day. And the last thing, MP, is that we are actually, I know the chairman would say that just getting 4 ships in the first year is not a lot, but it allows us to understand how to manage this thing in a more effective way, in an incremental way, which then when we get the larger numbers and a higher frequency, we are not overwhelmed by it at that point in time. So after the first one, is everything going to be perfect next week, Monday? I'm praying it will be, but what is the likelihood of that? It's not likely, but we're going to learn from that and fix it for the next time, MP. So that it's a learning process. I know that is not comforting to the committee, that we have not solved every single problem, but that's a part of life, that you learn and you grow.
Members, just as an oversight, I see where Mr. Miller, the Managing Director of NHT, and Mr. Dwayne Vernon from SDC are both here, but they weren't on my list. And a number of questions. I don't know if there's anything they would want to add to the discussion, or if
Is HAJ also here, Chairman? Housing Agency of Jamaica?
No, just NHT and okay. All right. So, second.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Pinnock, you raised the issue of the ownership of the assets in and around the Port Royal area, and you did indicate that there was an entity which you say is being held in abeyance. That's your words. What's the name of that entity?
Just for clarity, the ownership of the assets in Port Royal is most of the lands are held by the Commissioner of Lands.
Yes. And so what is it that the entity that you speak of, does it own?
It owns asset. It owns It's essentially a subsidiary of the UDC, and what it owns is some development plans. So there are a number of documents, assessments, and things like that we have. We have them in office.
So what is the real value attached to what it is that this entity owns?
You mean the assets that we have in hand?
Yes.
So there were some development plans, which I said, which we looked through. It included a number of things, considerations for cruise shipping, but at another location, considerations for theming of attractions and those kinds of things. So we have tried to extract as much value as possible out of those documents. But as I said, some of them would be superseded now. Some of the standards and requirements at this time would be newer than would have existed at the time. So things like strategic and the things we've been speaking about would have superseded those.
All right, let me get to the point I really want to get to. How, in terms of the disaggregation of the ownership, how is it going to be done? Because I know Prof speaks to his investment of $45 million, and what is your input into the
UDC?
Yeah.
The UDC, as I said, we have two roles. We're doing master planning, and I gave you the budget for that, which is master planning and coordination. Any projects out of that we work in, we would have to develop individual budget. So the only other specific project we're working on right now beyond the master planning and the coordination is a project with JNHT at Fort Rocky.
So you did indicate that you have budgeted $167 million.
We have a budget, and that includes, again, for some of the work, like the strategic environmental assessment, the housing
of that
survey.
167, where are you at December? Because you're somewhere...
what have we spent?
Yes.
Okay, we have spent, I would say, that's our budget for this financial year, So other
Which
than
takes you to the end of...
till March of this year. So other than the strategic environmental assessment, which I said is about to start, we would have spent all of the rest of that.
Right. And in terms, you Prof, you are spending 45, and that will take you...
That's a different currency.
Yes, $5 billion. Yes, of the $5 billion, how much have you expended then?
The 45 million that we are spending, all of that will be spent by April, May of this year.
Right.
That's the works.
And
so if you ask me right now, I can't tell you, because the way you have contracts with contractors, and there are certain commitments that are made, and we record those once they have done the work, submitted their certificates, and we have verified what they have done.
It has been committed.
It
has been committed, if not paid out.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yes. Right. And those funds are put aside for this project, Minister. We don't expect to spend 1 cent. The lady has just come back, and she will not allow us to spend 1 cent over that.
Good person to have.
Right. So of the 45, well, the $5 billion, how much of that are you taking from your own resources, as opposed to the borrowing sums, the sums which you're borrowing?
Directly from our resources, out of the 45, somewhere around 15 million US would be funds that come out of our financial resources.
Right.
The rest of it is borrowed.
Is borrowed. And do you have a moratorium on those sums, or you are going to be repaying back to the lending institution from day one on that $30 million?
Let me ask Elbert to tell you a little bit about the financial terms against the trailer, but I just want to underline that we didn't borrow. When we speak to the banks, we speak to them about our portfolio of projects. We didn't borrow just specifically on one project. So some are able to give a higher return than others, and they would have that information. There are some, and that's what the chairman was asking about, some in that portfolio are a bit more risky. Some are de-risked and generating funds at a good pace. This one, we would admit, is a little bit more risky. But what you then try to do is manage that risk as carefully as you can. Elva?
Yes, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. The loan terms we borrowed, they're a 25-year repayment period, and the interest rate is 8%. And just to add that we have
what currency?
Moratorium.
In what currency?
Jamaican, we borrowed in Jamaican dollars.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Right, because we're trying to manage the exchange risk. So even though we're earning in US, we're borrowing J dollars. And the market has the liquidity in there to support it. Port projects by nature, Chairman, as you can appreciate, is long-term investments. The facilities are expected with maintenance to last up to 50 years. So we sought to get long-term loans. The income is expected from both the passenger cess as well as we have some commercial space within the facilities that we expect to earn continuous income from. These, as Prof indicated, will involve some private participation. They'll be packaged, and we seek persons to participate in. So we have a sustainable income for that. The payback period we're looking at, or certainly we expect, as he indicated, to break even within the first 5 years. Will we make super profits? Not likely until after we've paid out.
You could clarify break even now.
Sorry? Oh, break even is when we're able to, our operating expenses at least will be covered, and we make some contribution towards
Operating expenses.
Yeah, and some contribution towards capital payment.
You're hoping to start that after 5 years?
Within 5 years, yes.
Okay.
Chairman, could I make one brief observation? I think now is a good place to raise it. We are happy to, because of the oversight that your committee plays, Mr. Chairman, we are happy to share information in relationship to this, and the things that you cannot get today, we'll provide them to you, we'll send you the appropriate correspondences. One of the things that strikes me about operating in the domain that we operate in is that what we say here today becomes public knowledge which is accessible by, I have no doubt that all the cruise lines are happy that we are saying the things that we are saying. I am certain that all of the other cruise destinations are glad to hear all of this, because I don't know what they spend on these projects, but because we are a transparent system, it places this in the public domain. We have to enter into arrangements with private partners going forward. That's how we hope to de-risk some of this, by not trying to take on everything ourselves, but to have other private partners come on board. They are happy when we tell everybody everything, because that changes the dynamic when you are negotiating with them in a substantive way. So I just wanted to make that note, Chairman. It's not that we're being defensive or trying to hide.
No, but I don't think anything has been asked of that nature, because the cost of a port, I think even when we did Falmouth, it was similar. The expenditures on those capital projects are always fairly transparent. I don't think we've really gone into any operations. But, because I'm about to.
And it's just something that has been bugging me. And we speak about the Falmouth experience compared to what we're doing now in Port Royal. And the Port Royal project is something that we've been talking about for a long time. But looking through your Appendix A, and I know that the whole cruise shipping that Port Authority used to deal with has now been transferred to Jamaica Vacations. But I get a sense that this project is a PAJ UDC, because here it shows that the Ministry of Tourism basically was engaged in November of 2019. And we're talking about a tourism product itself. But how is it that we're going to ensure? Because I remember when the Falmouth pier was being built, we're talking about the local experience. And I don't think we are there yet. As I heard Prof talking about, we won't have as much coming through the town, but you're taking them outside for other experience. But Port Royal itself becoming that experience, or the product itself. What we gather from the conversation is that many of the upgrades will come from the budget from the other agencies. And when NWC speaks about a budget of $1 billion to do the upgrade, I don't think they have had a capital budget of $1 billion over the last 2 years or 2 financial years. So what time frame are we looking at in that? Your master plan, what time frame and where will this money come from, the expenditure? I know it depending on NHT or JSIF out of their budget, but you know, is it an overall what I will call combined effort from ministries? Because many times they come inside here and they say, yeah, but you doing this and I am doing that and you, but yet still on a policy level, it is not coordinated because there seems to be priorities for other agencies and ministry. But I want to be comforted that we don't have the same experience or the same result as we have had. And where in all of this is the Ministry of Tourism, because it comes across as a Ministry of Economic Growth project and not a join-up effort with the Ministry of Tourism.
Okay, member, let me just restate what I said at the beginning, which is really our key role is coordinating through all of the agencies. And in fact, Ministry of Tourism and its agencies have been a part of our master planning and coordination process from as far back as the beginning of 2018. So they have been involved all along. I think the note you have there is related to a PAJ specific activity, but that's not as relates to the overall master planning or coordination. And just to say also that you will have seen from what we're doing that all of the agencies come together, and it is the some of the key items, as you said, would have to be in the budget of the other agencies, but that is also a part of what we've been looking at about where making sure that the big spends are included in those budgets going forward. Not all of them may be in 2021 because as you can see, we have a master planning process that will continue. And so we would look at identifying that as part of longer term financial planning. I was going to make another point about tourism. In fact, we had a commitment board at our public meeting and launch. And on that commitment board, the 3 main ministries that were there, in fact, 3 ministry logos are there, and they are Economic Growth and Job Creation, which is where PAJ and UDC reside, as well as Ministry of Culture and all of the rest of the name, Culture, Entertainment, Gender, Sport, and the Ministry of Tourism. So and in fact, all of the tourism agencies were there at that public meeting, were a part of that signing, and I would have to say have all been very committed to as a part of this process. I think today, because we know that they had presented, I think they were taken in December, so we have been trying to address, so I guess, some of the harder things, the port and the master planning things, because we know that you had that conversation before, but as you can see, they're here with us, as they have been.
I mean, my cynicism coming from it, I mean, we have had Ministry of Transport sitting out in front of us talking about Boscobel and plans and, you know, you know, aircrafts coming, and then we're talking about, as I said, we've been talking about the expansion of and the development of same Falmouth, because there has been a long-standing sewage problem there. So it's just to ensure that there is that coordination and plan, but budgeting to, Happy New Year to you too, budgeting to come. But Prof had touched on, to give us an idea of when these 4 ships come in, the tour that they will take these visitors on, or Ms. Roberts can.
Okay. Member, I just want to concur with Mrs. Pinnock that we have been at the table from day one and working with the agencies. And as it relates to the marketing, we have been speaking to the cruise lines. As Prof said earlier, everybody is sort of in a wait and see, let's see what happens, because we've heard this before. And as such, we have together worked on a plan to bring the cruise executives here later in mid-year this year to take them on a tour of the port. But in our last meetings with them late last year, they have seen us start already, and there's a lot of interest, as Prof said earlier. So we're looking forward to probably having, from as early as next year, probably some more interest. And not just from the European lines, which we thought were the places that we should target, but we're also getting interest from the North American lines.
Chair, if I could just quickly, I'm glad that MP Phillips has taken us to Appendix A. MP, let me say that, and apologize because I should have sent partial listing. If you look at that, it's really a 2019 listing. And this project started from 2017. So there are ongoing meetings with the various agencies, certainly UDC and JAMVAC and the Tourism Ministry generally. I would say that some of those meetings, earlier meetings, MP, would have taken place in the context of a briefing of everything, because we are working with them on what is, there's, for example, a big project from TEF in Falmouth, the Hamden Wharf project. We'll be updating them on that, as well as on Port Royal. So forgive that this is just 2019. Secondly, and so tourism has been there from the outset. So to give you a sense of the kind of tours, MP, as I think you know the sector well, and certainly the chairman understands it very well. There are tours that are referred to as pre-booked tours. These are tours which are sold by the cruise lines. They are a product of the cruise lines, even if they get local entities to put on the tours. The tours that we know of that they'll be doing, there's a reggae tour that tours all of the Bob Marley related areas in Culture Yard, in the recording studio, going up to the museum, to the statue and stadium and so on. That culture is where Bob Marley, although they say culture and so on, it's really Bob Marley centric. They have a special Port Royal tour themselves, which will, aside from going to Fort Charles, will go to the church, St. Peter's, and the Naval Hospital. They have a coffee and Kingston tour, which goes up into the hills to Crichton Estate, and but will stop at various locations in Kingston on the way going and coming back. And there's a City Highlights tour, which will pass.
Members, just one final request, and not to be answered now. As the housing agency is not here, and I know that the UDC is looking at this as part of their overall development, there are 50 lots of land that were earmarked for housing. And now I know that there are some new thinking, and probably for the benefit of this committee, we could get a report from both UDC and the housing agency on the proposed plans for these lots.
All right, members, let me, on your behalf, thank the Port Authority and the other agencies, UDC, the ministries, the Ministry of Tourism, too many to mention, NEPA, Water Commission, Culture, etc. Prof, I think the point that was made last is one that I think is the most, is very important. One thing is bringing tourism to Jamaica, whether it is stopover or cruise. The other is this sense of inclusiveness. And I listened to your presentations, and I think that you are trying your best to see if that can be brought to this project. I think one of the issues we have had with some of the more recent projects, such as Port Antonio, and Falmouth, is there still a cry on the ground that while ships are coming in, the persons in the community, and not just that community, but the wider Jamaican outside of the big attractions, are not feeling the impact of tourism. And this is creating a real problem for us. And I think philosophically we have to focus on really getting this tourism product to be as inclusive as possible. I think we have the best opportunity here. The Port Royal is a smaller community, more easily identified. The extent to which they can feel included, and the wider Kingston as an experience, this is an opportunity to make it work for the benefit of the people of Jamaica. So we're just hoping the first ship comes next week, is it? And hopefully we'll see usually the first one or two because of all the fanfare. But as we get in later this year, we are really going to have to analyze it and look at it so that they're especially in this project, which the payback for it, as we have said, must be justified by the social and sort of economic benefit it is going to give to the smaller person and the wider communities, would be really the justification for it. So we wish you all the best and hope for a good day next week. So members, with that, I want to thank just all who attended today. I think it was a very useful and a very informative sitting. And next week we will continue. Next week is the Ministry of National Security, which we will take them next week, Wednesday at 10 o'clock. So with that, thank you all. Meeting is now adjourned.
You got to wise up about your money. You have to make sure say your money secure. When you need to grow, you have access to more.
Financial inclusion means that individuals and businesses have access to useful